Welcome to this edition of the OTT-X Wednesday webinar series. I'm Eric Hansen, VP of Industry Leadership at OTT-X and your host for the series. On behalf of the team at OTT-X, I want to thank all of you for joining us this morning to the series where we bring you insightful, thought-provoking presentations across a broad spectrum of OTT-related topics from thought leaders across our industry. Today, we're pleased to have with us George Rausch, the VP of Product and Distribution for Blu Digital Group. George oversees both product development of Blu's software as a service offering and its distribution strategy for the content that Blu licenses. He's a pioneer and evangelist in the OTT video space with more than a decade of experience in film and television operations, as well as software product development, including holding senior roles at Pluto TV and Frequency. We also want to thank Blu Digital Group for participating in our webinar series today. Blu have been great supporters of OTT-X, including the OTT-X Leadership Development Foundation, an organization dedicated to the vision of a diverse, inclusive business and technical workforce in the OTT industry. Thank you to Blu. I know we're all looking forward to George's talk today entitled, "What is Ad-Supported Linear OTT-TV and How Does It Fit Into My Distribution Strategy?" So with that, I'll turn it over to George Rausch of Blu Digital. Welcome, George.
Hey now. Thanks for the introduction, Eric, and hello to everyone. Good morning. I'm looking at the attendee list, a lot of familiar names and faces.
Excuse me, George, morning. I have to interrupt.
Yes.
It seems your audio is not functioning for us. I see that you're not on mute. Okay, I'm hearing that it is working for others. Well, then let's continue.
Okay, if that is the case, great. Good morning, everyone. Eric, thank you for the kind introduction. Again, hello to everyone. I put on a collar shirt for the first time in 90 days, so that's how much I appreciate you. And yes, I have been doing this for about a decade, working in video platforms, and I've actually worked with many of you who are on the list here today. A lot of my experience for what I'm about to talk about today comes from my time that I spent at Pluto TV. You could see me as kind of employee number 2 or maybe number 4 at the company, but I was there in the early days from 2013 through 2017 and saw a lot of stuff and gained a lot of insight before I went off and started to work independently with folks and then joined Frequency, built some software, and then as of last summer joined Blu to work on all of their software. So without further ado, I'm going to cut over to the presentation. Please stand by. Here we go. Okay. This over here. And here we go again. Great. Just want to confirm that I think everyone can see that now.
Absolutely, it looks great.
Thank you. All right, here we go. I want to start off by saying linear TV is still relevant. There's a lot of people out there that talk about saying television's dead, linear television's dead. I think we need to separate paying $250 a month for getting access to linear television and then the act of watching a continuous stream that is thoughtfully programmed. Those are two very separate things. There's the business model and then there's the actual creative execution of a channel. So to kick things off, and I'm sure everyone pretty much knows the story of television, but I want to start off by giving an incredibly brief history of how we got to where we are today. So let's just say that TV was born in the 1940s, transitioned to satellite in the 70s, expanded in the 80s to the early 2000s, and then in 2005, YouTube was born and said to the world, we don't need linear. You can watch what you want when you want. Basically, 65 years of television history was told, you're old and we don't want you anymore. As far as a news story, linear kind of took a hiatus for about a decade until Pluto TV came along and said, free linear TV still matters. As Netflix started to eat into cable subscriber numbers, other new virtual MVPDs, or we'll say OTT subscription TV operators, came online. Because the truth is, people still like to watch linear TV. And apparently, Viacom thought so too. As you can see, and as everyone probably knows, Viacom acquired Pluto TV in 2019, and it kind of set off a chain of other acquisitions. And I believe that linear is more necessary than ever because there is more content than ever. Viewers need curation, and linear TV provides curation as a core function, not as a feature or an add-on. Following on Viacom's acquisition of Pluto TV in 2019, in early 2020, Comcast acquired Xumo. Pluto partnered with TiVo Plus to distribute several of its curated channels, and Redbox has also added AVOD and ad-supported linear TV to its offering. So, goes without saying, I think linear is still a thing. And then here's another interesting metric to kind of look at. Causation isn't necessarily correlation, but let's take this into account as well. While all the growth of VOD has occurred, linear continues to expand. Look at this Nielsen report showing the growth of OTA, or over-the-air TV, in US homes. As consumers have moved away from cable subscriptions, they're picking up the over-the-air TV to make up for the loss of linear channels. I mean, it's a pretty massive growth over that period of 8 years. And I do want to show this. The promise of VOD as the future of TV may have been a bit overstated. As you can see, there was a massive SVOD craze in 2016. Many of the folks here probably were involved with it, where people were trying to compete with Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon. Many businesses underestimated the amount of effort to build, launch, and support an SVOD service for the long haul. As a result, the only companies that can afford to launch SVOD's offerings are those with deep pockets and vast catalogs of heritage brands. For example, Disney+, CBS All Access, and now Peacock and HBO Max. We will see how HBO Max does, having launched less than a week ago, but it's slower launch than Disney+, but it is still on a very good trajectory. Otherwise, for a consumer to use additional services is purely for finding niche content that is outside the major SVOD platforms. So, you thought you were going to build your own SVOD app to compete with Amazon, Hulu, and Netflix. The market has proven that it is nearly impossible at this point to do that and effectively have something in the market. I want everyone here to think of linear TV as an app. Your linear channel will act as your app, wherein you control the programming voice and the consumer experience, no matter where it's distributed. This is the app or service you thought you were going to create for SVOD, but now it's just taking a different form. So, not to save this for the end, let's just get down to business. I'm sure the burning question everyone wants to know is, how much money can I make? So I'll start with that. I see who's attending today. There are some folks that are already doing linear in many different formats, so these numbers will be familiar to you, but for everyone else, there is no simple answer. Hence the wild spread on revenue potential. And yes, the numbers that I'm showing here are based on numbers that a lot of people, a lot of channels out there are capable of getting. Factors that can affect your channel are your channel placement. Are you buried down at the bottom versus more towards the top? Your ad fill rate, the effective CPM, meaning the average CPM over the period of a month or a quarter, quality of content, content refresh rate, content duration, motion graphics, whether you have direct sales, promotional placement by the distributor, name recognition of titles and actors, HD versus HD, and much more. While imperfect, there's enough variety of OTT linear channels today to get comps on how your channels may perform when speaking with distributors or your fellow channel providers. It is a small community, and the community is here today on the channel. Simply have conversations with your colleagues. Many of them are already out there. They can tell you where they've had issues with contracts, where they've had issues with technology, what they're seeing is working, what is not. Talk. So the question at this point is, how do I get into the game, and where does my brand fit? Since 2014, the number of free ad-supported OTT services and subscription-based linear OTT video services has grown immensely in the face of declining pay TV subscribers in the United States. Everything that I'm really talking about today is the United States. Other parts of the world are coming online with channels. In fact, a lot of these distributors that you see on here now have versions for South America, for Europe, and other territories. But this list is US OTT linear distributors, continues to grow, and there are many other platforms across the globe. The key takeaway here is these are all the places where your linear channel could be distributed. So now that I've shown you that there is a monetization opportunity for linear, folks, just hold on 1 second. Oh boy, I didn't realize my dog was in here. Hold on 1 second. Get out. At least I'm wearing pants, right? Okay.
That's nice of you, George. Thank you.
I know. Yeah. I was I was thinking about it, but no, my dog's going crazy because we have our kids in the house. So now that I've shown you that the monetization opportunity for linear and the distribution platforms exist, you're probably wondering how much content and what kind of content you'll need to make a linear channel. In short, linear channels need a lot of content. Hundreds of hours of content to be like real TV. And I'll come back to what real TV means a little bit later. Unlike YouTube, where it's very unusual to have other providers' content on your channel, or you could say really any VOD platform, it's the opposite of a linear channel. TV channels license a fair amount of their programming, as we all know, and therefore focus on finding content that fits their programming point of view. For example, you may need to only focus on producing content or paying for exclusive content for prime time and then licensing content for the other times of day. Additionally, as this is linear, you can start to think about your schedule as an opportunity to sell airtime to others who may want distribution of a single show. You can't create a linear channel if you only have one show. For example, on a rev share basis or a licensing fee, you, as the channel creator, could give someone the 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. slot on weekdays to do a live program or a previously recorded live or some other program. In fact, you could potentially request the content provider pay you for your reach to distribute their show. It's the old TV playbook, but now it doesn't require satellites and the advertising is programmatic. And then a few other points I want to call out here is the hours that I've listed here. It's kind of a starting point, and per distributor, some want different refresh rates on a monthly basis. The goal here is that day over day, when viewers come back to your channel, you want to make sure that they're not seeing the same thing. Most of the time, a viewer will tune in pretty much at the same time because that's when they use their device, and it shouldn't be seeing the same thing every day. And then also, I will call out that episodic, meaning shorter content, because you can watch a lot of it in one sitting, performs better than just doing 100% movies. But again, give and take programming is a very soft, creative kind of thing. Let's talk about content quality. Quality is extremely subjective, as we all know, and it comes down to how you program it into your channel. Therefore, I'm only calling out a few factors that are definite items to consider when putting together a linear channel. First, short-form content as looping playlist is on the decline. Distributors are scaling back these types of channels and focusing on longer-form content that is editorialized. Second, HD or widescreen, doesn't necessarily have to be HD, is greatly preferred by both platforms and viewers. And any vertical or square social video may be outright rejected at this point by a distributor for carriage. Finally, it goes without saying that any content you distribute must be free and clear of messaging such as YouTube shoutouts, URLs, calls to action, and any burned-in subtitles that are commonly used on social media platforms for when the videos are on mute. You have to have a clean linear version for your distribution of linear. And it also goes without saying, you need to have a clean version if you're planning on to put these titles into a VOD environment as well. So now that you've decided you're going to make a linear channel, you have to choose how you're going to schedule it. You have two options. Very loosely, I'm saying you have two options. Obviously, it's, again, a soft art where you can combine things, but if you think about it in two ways, we have looped playlist or scheduled. And there are pros and cons to each, and you'll have to take these into consideration as you make your channel. So when thinking about a looped playlist, pros are, of course, it's easy to program. Line it up, play it out, it loops, you refresh it. It's ideal for scheduling short-form content, basically line it up, play it out, easy peasy, done and done. And it's a low-impact way to test the channel concept. Cons are, it doesn't look like real TV, and it doesn't create viewing habits. Let's come back down to what is real TV. Real TV means what people have come to expect over many, many decades. It crafts a story, it goes through time, it brings the viewer along with you, it provides context. It's not to say that the way TV has been done is the best. There's definitely room for improvement, but it's about creating a continuous story where if somebody comes in, they're having an experience and it doesn't just feel like a looping kiosk that you'd see in a mall or waiting in line. Remember waiting in line for a sandwich? Or at a bus stop, again, you know, being out in public, not something we're doing right now, but again, it's the difference between basically a kiosk channel, like what you see in a bar, versus a thoughtfully scheduled channel. And I also want to come back to that asterisk item of it's a easy way to test a channel. A lot of people start here because the thought is that it's easy, cost-effective, and overall lighter lift. But the truth is a loop playlist doesn't create habitual viewing. And if you speak with any content provider who currently has channels that are looping playlists, they will tell you that there's an issue of retaining viewership. And I've mentioned before, distributors are now becoming more discerning about the quality of programming experience for their viewers on linear channels that they carry. So looped playlists are kind of in the decline in favor of putting a little bit more thought into how the channel is programmed. And then there is scheduled, meaning it looks like real TV. It's designed to create viewership habits. You can create programming blocks, so day over day when you think about how to do things or on weekends or whatever, you have repeatable patterns so that you can program more easily. And the other thing is it's ideal for tracking channel performance and content performance. If you don't have a movie block or a certain show running at a certain time, how do you know if you make a programming change that it's having a material impact on the performance of your channel? You don't, because you have to have some kind of control. The cons are, it's definitely more involved. You know, there's effort that has to go into it, and the tools and the software that you'll have to use will cost more than free. If you're just sending your things off into a playlist or someone else to do it, it costs basically zero and it's a rev share. As soon as you start stepping into software, you got to start paying for something. So now that you've chosen saying, I want to do either a looped playlist or I want to do more of a scheduled channel, you need to select the delivery method of your linear channel. And the three options, and again, today people use these interchangeably. Sometimes they'll use one type for one distributor and another for another, and then they'll graduate into the third option that I've presented here. I'm just going to present these holistically, and we can have a conversation about it later. But the big thing here is it's when it comes to how you want to schedule, it's like clothes. It's like anything. It's going to be how it feels for you. So let's dive into it. Syndication only. This means basically you take your content, you give it to somebody else, and then they do the work. No cost to operate except for your operational expenses to get the content to the platform. Distributor handles scheduling. I want to talk about, there's a difference between programming and scheduling. Programming means it's how you want your content ordered and run. Scheduling is the technical action of laying in that order and all of the events that happen inside of it. So you're supposed to, when these syndication methods, tell the distributor how you want it programmed, but sometimes that relationship, you know, you're not fully in control of your channel. That's one of the issues here. Platforms are a little bit different how they handle it. Pros again here, built-in monetization, and it's basically found money for almost no effort. Folks that have used Zumo and Pluto know the size of the checks that can come in there for content. It's basically, again, found money for doing almost no effort. Cons are you aren't in control of your channel. and I know there's some people on the channel here who might work with some of these platforms and they wanted to do a live program or they needed something scheduled at a certain time and they missed their deadline because it's hard because you're not in control of actually being able to move the programming around. And the other downside is there's limited to no off-platform distribution. For example, Pluto and Zumo, there are other platforms that take your content, but let's just focus on those two as they're the two biggest in this area. And they take different approaches to scheduling. Pluto has a hard calendar, right? It goes against hours, half hours, quarter hours. The commercial breaks are a certain duration, whereas Zumo lines things up in a certain order and plays them out. The commercial breaks might be different depending on the device and a whole bunch of other factors. Pluto sends channels to Vizio watch free, and Zumo has a deal with Redbox. They have other deals, but this is an example of off-platform distribution. That being said, that was a very lengthy list of distribution. If you go through those providers, they can't also take you there today to those platforms. You would need to bring your own software, which brings me to the next item on the list, turnkey OTT-TV solutions. Some examples of software here are Frequency Studio, software that I had a part in designing, Whirl, Sniffercat, also known as Mux IP, and there are others out there as well, but I would say that these three are the biggest kind of options. These are managed technology, meaning you don't have to have an AWS account, you don't have to have an encoder account, you don't have to do the CDN, they just handle it for you. They bundle their services together. You don't have to sign a deal for the CDN and sign a deal for storage, and they just handle it. There's either low cost or no cost for these solutions compared to a much more professional build your own kind of solution. They have built-in distribution relationships. In many cases, they have distribution relationships. It doesn't mean you have to use them, but they're there. And some of the platforms also provide optional monetization services. So if you don't have your own ad ops team, or you don't even have an ad tag to do programmatic advertising, they can offer that for you. The cons are unable to be highly customized. Yes, there is a level of customization, but doing like system level integrations may not be possible. In some cases, again, it varies by platform and by solution, and also they have been getting better over time. They're not 100% traditional broadcast compliant. So audio levels, picture, white levels, a whole bunch of other things. They're getting better, but you can't be guaranteed that they are the best. Limited rights management. For those folks out there that use things like Film Track or RightsLine or whatever, and you're looking at exhibition restrictions, territory restrictions, a whole bunch of other things. You're going to still have to manage those elsewhere. You can't also incorporate all of those features into these platforms. And they're limited motion graphics capabilities. Frequency Studio has one of the most compelling options for motion graphics today. But again, everyone has their own solution and they're starting to add things into them. And then there's the final, which is build your own or bring your own broadcast stack. The pros here are it's highly configurable. Multi-use system for all your distribution. You might be using a CMS that you can also, or I should say a MAM or a DAM that you can use for other things. It's 100% traditional broadcast TV compliant, so all those things you have to check the box if you were to send it on to a more professional platform are covered. Comprehensive integrations, and the best part is because you're getting all the software pieces yourself, you're getting it at cost without any markup because it's not a managed service. Cons are, it needs expertise to put this together. You need someone who knows what they're doing and understands specifically the OTT market and the distributor's needs to put together the best-in-class pieces. It's expensive to start and operate. I mean, a lot of these more bigger solutions are looking for 2 to 5 year software contracts, tens of thousands of dollars of setup costs. And because the tools are beefier, there's more training. You have to pay for training, and you have to train people how to use the tools. You also, in some cases, have to bring your own monetization. So you have to come to the table with those solutions. And then distribution relationships, you've got to bring those yourself. That being said, I have to believe that if you're at this tier and you're willing to spend this money and you have the quality of content, you probably know the distributors because you're probably already sending content there. That being said, keep it in mind that you will have to manage your own distribution relationships. If done correctly, and this option here is what the channels that are making the most money are doing. That being said, I also do know that the channels that are doing this sometimes also use this and this as distribution methods, because it's like they put the whole story together using different solutions. My personal opinion is that you should have a unified linear channel across all things. Therefore, you know your message to your consumer is even and is not muddled. The dog is going to drive me crazy, guys.
We like it. You should just bring the dog in.
I got to bring the dog in. This is the real problem because we have to keep the door closed. I'm sorry, everybody. Oh, gosh. Nuts, dog. Nuts. It goes in and out, in and out.
No, I have the same problem.
So at the top, you have to ask yourself, why am I creating this channel? Hopefully at this point, I've convinced you that linear TV is more relevant now than ever, provided a framework for how much content you'll need, given you clarity on the methods for scheduling and for delivering a linear channel. The questions you have to ask yourself before you jump in are, is there a gap in the market that needs to be filled? This is very common stuff, but I'm going to say right now, people aren't asking these questions. And it is really hard to get a linear channel started and then to keep it up, even if you're doing the lightweight version. And many of you who are on this call today know that because you're doing it. Are you competing against other similar channels for audience? That's something you don't want to do. You really need to find your special corner of the market and go after that. If so, what makes you special and makes you believe you'll succeed where others have failed? I can't stress it enough. A lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to get into the linear game. I'm going to put my stuff up. I'm going to make some money. You really need to come to the table with a plan, because this is a business model and you really have to think about it, which comes down to, what is the business goal of your channel? In my opinion, doing the build your own, bring your own broadcast is going to get you the most robust and profitable channel. But like I said, it does take more of an upfront investment and requires more operational resources to maintain. So the question you have to ask yourself is, what kind of business you're trying to build? Is it short-term incremental revenue with limited investment and risk? If that's the case, syndicate your content. Send it out there, let people program it, get that found money. Or even the turnkey solution where you'll have some control over your channel, but you won't be committing to multi-year contracts with tens of thousands of dollars of upfront costs. If you're looking for a long-term investment to create a meaningful new revenue stream, you're definitely looking at doing a turnkey solution and then graduating and thinking about moving into building your own broadcast stack. Or are you looking at a long-term equity play where your plan is to sell your channel to a large company? It's now aging now by about a year to 2, maybe even 3 years, but that's what Cheddar and Newsy did. They cobbled together their own broadcast stacks because the goal was always to be sold to a much larger entity. And the type of content that you have will also play into a factor of how you schedule and the software that you select. For example, if you have a show that basically schedules itself, and I'm talking like crime procedurals, you can imagine the other kind of programs, repeatable sports like poker and other things like that, which are kind of evergreen content. You can get away with looping your content endlessly with a level of refresh, of course, because viewers are there for a very specific thing, and the content is familiar and comforting to watch endlessly. So you don't necessarily need to go with a more expensive option of software if your content, you can use a less expensive piece of software, because basically the content kind of sells itself. The final piece here is selling against your channel is critical to its success. Because I've been on both sides of this. I've been on the platform, both 3 sides. I've been on the platform side, I was at Pluto. I was on the software side of Frequency, where I was making software and trying to sell it. And now at Blu, we are using software to do things. So I've seen all sides of it. you can't let the cost get in the way of thinking about the revenue potential. A lot of people are like, oh my God, it's going to cost $2,000, $4,000, $6,000. These are all prices people have heard if you're licensing software for linear. But what you have to realize is, if you're actually going to sell against your channel, meaning, are you going to do direct sales? Are you planning on having someone to manage ad ops? And are you thinking of new ways to optimize revenues, special eventized programming, other things like that? The technology cost is going to go from being a large part of your OpEx to down to like very little, like 10% or less, if you are really focused on selling against the channel. If you are not planning on doing these other types of monetization, syndicating your content to make a channel is about as far as you may want to go. And using a turnkey solution may require more time than it's worth for the revenue. Television was designed to entertain and market stuff to viewers. And if you don't want to play in that world, linear ad-supported TV may not be for you. Can't stress it enough. The technology costs are actually coming down with every passing year. CDNs are less expensive. The software and storage and like all these things are coming down. The technology costs are going to be a very small part of your OpEx if you're going to invest in selling against your channel. So don't be blinded by the cost of the software, because the opportunity is very great if you have really put your thought into the business model. And then everyone's like, the CDN bill is huge. Here's the thing about CDN. If nobody's watching your content, your CDN bill is zero, because CDN is usage-based. So ostensibly, CDN against revenue should match. And the final thing that I have to say today is, operating a TV channel is hard. It's hard. At Pluto, there was a team of people operating like 150 channels. I've had to see people operate channels, individuals. It's hard, it's challenging. And no matter what vendors try to sell you as easy, it takes a lot of work. There's a small army of people behind every successful channel. Operating a TV channel cannot be an extra job that someone does on the side. I'm an advocate for linear OTT-TV, and I'm here to help create new channels as I see a bright future for this format. It's not easy to start from scratch, so luckily at this point there are software vendors and companies like Blu who can help show you the way. So at this point, I am done with my presentation, and all I have to say is, if you have a passion for your content and brand and want to create a linear OTT-TV channel, please feel free to reach out and connect with me. My contact information is here. Obviously, we're part of the organization. And many of you already have my email address, but thank you, Eric and OTT.X and everyone for some time today.
Thanks a lot, George. That was a terrific talk, and I think I'm ready to get started with my own linear TV channel. Many of you might know I have a passion for mixology, so I may be giving you a call with some questions about how I can get it up and running. So we do have some time if there's some questions from our group of attendees. One of the things that we can do with our Zoom platform is we can take questions and give folks a chance to actually ask them as if we were passing the mic around at a conference. So I'm going to invite anybody who has a question to use your Zoom kiosk or your Zoom controls to raise your hand, and then we'll call you. If you don't want to do that, you can also type your question into the Q&A screen, and then I will read it aloud. Do we have any hand raisers? George, that was a terrific overview. I've learned a lot. In fact, I'm going to go back and see if I can rewatch some of the video. Give us a lot of information about the space. Thanks a lot for sharing it. I do have someone who has stepped up to break the ice here. It's Freddie Godfrey. Freddie, thanks for joining us. You now have the mic.
Oh, Freddie, hello.
I couldn't resist it. Hello, George. Firstly, Joe, thank you again. This is my second, I think, OTT-X webinar that I've sort of watched and listened to, and I think they're great. So thank you, and keep it up. Obviously, you've got a great speaker here in George. I love the lasers. I think they're fabulous. Will there be a way? I've got a few friends and folks who would really benefit from having listened to this, who probably weren't here today. Is there actually a way that is there a way to share the recording outside the realm of this group, or is it a case of I just send them your way, George, or I just make up a bunch of lies and pretend I know what I'm talking about?
I believe Eric is, he can answer the question about the recording, but you have my email address for the other questions, Freddie.
Yeah, Freddie, that's absolutely true. In fact, it's up to your discretion, really, which, if all of those responses, if not all of them, those responses you want to take, I'm sure George would be happy to hear from you. If you want to lie to your friends or make stuff up, that's also fine. The recording will be available on our YouTube channel. So we'll get that information out to everybody.
It was good to listen to.
Thank you, Freddie. Eric, I did notice that there's one question that came in the Q&A.
Yeah, why don't I read that? Thank you, Jeremy, for asking this question. What creates such a large swing around monthly gross revenue? Is it content type or some other factor? Yeah,
that's a good question. I presented a lot of information here. One of the biggest things that comes down to when you're negotiating your contract with your distributor is promotional placement of channel. And as anyone will tell you, in the website days, it was the above the fold. Depending on whether you're able to negotiate it, getting a placement where they feature your channel or it goes out in the platform's emails or however they communicate with their viewers to drive attention to your channel is very, very important. That can be one of the biggest factors. Number two, it does come down to the name recognition, as well as it might not have name recognition, but it has a very visceral connection with the audience. The content, if it speaks to the audience, they'll come back again and again. When it comes to volume, when people start to notice day over day that things are repeating, they kind of get a little bit weary of the channel, and they're like, what is this really? And it comes down to quantity of content, promotional placement. Are you committing to really creating a unique experience? Because again, television's all about, is the viewer entertained? Always. Are they entertained? And those factors cannot be dismissed together. And then here's the other really sad part about this, because if you're not familiar with how programmatic advertising works, the same viewer watching on their home in Los Angeles and a viewer watching in a different state and even on a different device can get different advertising with different CPMs, because programmatic advertising is looking at the audience by its region. And if you happen to, on a programmatic basis, they have a lot of viewership in a region that has lower CPM, that can be a cruel factor to why your revenue isn't as good, which comes back down to direct sales. If you're selling a $50 CPM, no matter who's watching it, you're getting a $50 CPM. So it comes back down to the business model. Again, hard question to answer, Jeremy, because there's just so many factors. But I'm going to tell you right now, negotiating for promotional placement and then really creating a community through your channel and not just saying, the content's up there, is really, really important.
Absolutely. Okay, we have another question. This is from an anonymous attendee. What's your perception of single brand dedicated channels versus aggregated channels that include multiple brands? Is one type inherently more successful than the other?
That's a really good question. So it's hard because you have single branded channels, which are traditional publisher brands. And there's a lot of these channels out there where they basically took all their short form content and made it into a linear channel. Those have had a hard time in the long term retaining viewership. when you talk about a single channel brand, let's think of, for example, I guess it's a traditional one, but Comedy Central. It's comedy, generally speaking, but they license movies and other things, and it's a curated point of view. The way that VOD was set up, it was designed to be, it's just all the content from your brand, and that's what it is. Here's a perfect example. A technology channel. Is a technology channel just Mashable, just CNET, just Wired? The answer is no. As a viewer, you're probably going to want all of those rolled up into one channel, and that channel will perform better because it provides a much more well-rounded view. I cannot speak to how it's performing now, but in my time at Pluto, when you created a more well-rounded channel that brought in many different views and created a better viewing experience, they did perform better than doing just the standalone brands. Again, it comes down to how it's programmed. If a singular brand was really, really thoughtful about how it was programming its stuff, and also licensing movies or television that are in the voice of that brand, a single branded channel could be great. I think the real question here is challenging what it means to be a single brand and saying, what else does my audience want to watch aside from the content that I produce, and putting it on the channel to create a really well-rounded viewing experience for linear.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it kind of goes both ways. You know, it does need to be consistent. If my mixology channel also has a bunch of quilting content or something, it's not very consistent, and it might actually do as well as two separate channels with separate brands. Any other questions? So I'm going to do quilting and cocktails, but I need to probably set those up as two separate channels, unless I can find something to tie them together. Do I have other questions? It looks like we do. Thank you, Beth Anderson, for your question. The digital linear streaming market is evolving rapidly, with new platforms emerging frequently. Do you see a world in which leading platforms will have interest in exclusive carriage of third-party channels? Or do you see owned and operated channels, for example, Pluto TV, fully owned and scheduled channels, as the most likely road to highlight each platform's unique selling proposition? This will affect content owners' distribution strategy.
Beth, this is a great question, and it's one that I've been in the middle of when I was at Pluto, and then afterwards I had an opinion on this when designing software. Pluto's position has always been that they want to program their channels, and they take very few third-party channels. As a result, the onus rests upon Pluto to support and manage all those channels. They may continue to do that. We'll see how the market evolves. But I do think that, and I strongly believe in this, that the next move is going to be, first of all, I made it very passing in my presentation. I said that distributors are now becoming more discerning about the channels that they carry. They want thoughtful programming with good refresh, channels that have that good extra feel, like the motion graphics and other things, so there's context over time. And part of that is that's the first phase, and pretty soon after that, they're going to say, well, I want my channel to be unique against the version that is going somewhere else. And only the more professional software can offer this today, but there are ways to do it with the more turnkey solutions. You could start having we'll call it the global feed, if we start thinking about the old days of the national syndication feed and then the local spots. I can see a world in which very soon you're having your national version that goes out to everyone, and then for those people that you get a better deal for either promotional MGs or what other things, you might make primetime exclusive to that platform and run different programming, we'll say, in primetime on a platform. I think that's a next logical step, and then obviously you're going to get into, and then the programming has to be exclusive to the platform. I think that is coming. Today, only the really professional software and scheduling tools can create a master schedule and then create the local schedules and then manage all of the playout and technology. But it is something that is coming.
All right, we have another question from Kirby Grimes. Thanks, Kirby, for joining us. What do you think about Roku's latest linear TV announcement, EPG and new channels?
Roku has been doing linear for a while, but if anyone's seen it before, it's been it's just tiles. It says, here's the channel, it says that it's live, and that's about it. Moving towards having the more robust visual, which is what Pluto has, which is what TiVo has, which is what a lot of the other platforms has, is going to be really, really important for them. And they're also one of those platforms that's revisiting the type of channels that they're carrying. I think it's all good stuff, and Roku's moving in the right direction. I personally feel that having the EPG is incredibly important. I ran a test a few years back where the channel was run with and without an EPG, and noticed that there was about a 20% jump in viewership when there was an EPG, because it provides context. Yeah, in general, I'm really bullish about Roku. I love that they're both the software vendor and they're the hardware vendor that gives them a lot of power to do things. And they're moving in the right direction. Yeah.
All right, terrific, thank you. We still have a little more time for questions. It looks like we have a hand raiser. Unless I'm mistaken.
I think that was still Freddie.
Freddie's back. Freddie, do you have another question? I thought I put your hand down, but...
Oh yeah, I'll lower my own hand. There we go. Very quickly, I love this Roku topic. And so I have about a bazillion questions about it, but I'm going to leave you with just one. You may have seen me commenting on this recently in an article. What's your opinion about the EPGs using the phrase live the way that they are? You've got live and you've got linear, right? And sort of the twain seem to have met in a way that I think's kind of janky and kind of dishonest, but also kind of just become the norm. What are your thoughts on that?
So this is a really, really great. I'm going to talk about 3 subjects here, and I think this is really important for the room. Let's talk about, is it linear AVOD or is it ad-supported linear OTT-TV? Let's start there. AVOD means ad-supported VOD. I like saying ad-supported linear OTT-TV simply because traditionally the rights, for anyone who's out there who's negotiated rights, it's the BCTV right? The broadcast television right, something that you negotiate. We need to really differentiate when doing contracts between ad-supported VOD, which is the business model, and the consumption method, which is ad-supported and VOD, and ad-supported linear OTT, because again, it's not ad-supported linear broadcast. So those 2 things, I want to just put that in everyone's mind when thinking about contracts. Don't say, a lot of people say linear at AVOD, but it's like, it's not. You're putting the delivery method and the business model together in one, and you really should separate those out when talking about things. That's how we do. Blu does license some channels to do SVOD distribution and a few other things. And when we do our contracts, we differentiate between AVOD, meaning ad-supported VOD, and ad-supported linear. Next, let's talk about live versus linear. Oh boy. So this comes down to the platform's interpretation of what it means. We all know that live means that what's on the other side. Do we? It's like saying, oh yeah, that's normal. It's such a hard conversation. Live, the way I treat it when I write out my contracts, live means that it is not previously recorded and it is playing out in real time. Linear means that it is playing out in real time and you cannot play, pause, rewind, skip ahead, and all that other kind of stuff. That's the way, and people saying live, it's kind of like, you call it a 4K TV. Anyone here who knows anything about resolution, we don't have 4K TVs. We have Ultra HD TVs. It's a different width in the resolution. Again, nuances, it comes down to kind of marketing language here. And then the final one I want to talk about here, which is also a confusing factor, and this also plays into how people get confused about the software that they choose, is scheduling versus broadcast programming and trafficking and ad trafficking. So scheduling is the technical action of laying in the events, primary events meaning the video object, secondary events which are laid on top, if you want to think about that, of motion graphics, other things that happen on top of the primary event, which is the video, audio cues, other things like that. Laying in the event. Broadcast programming and ad trafficking is the actual making of the template that says video segment happens here, then there's a commercial break. Inside the commercial break happens, we'll be right back, then a 30-second break, then a house promo, then a 30-second ad, then now back to the program, then it cuts back to segment 2 of video. Scheduling is technical. Broadcast programming is the creation of the template. A lot of the software that people use today, and I didn't want to call out vendors by name about what they really do, but if you think about what the difference between like Amagi's system and I'll use Frequency Studio, is that Amagi's system is scheduling and playout, which is the technical assembly of all the items, primary and secondary events. It's very good at doing it. It's a professional, broadcast quality system. But the expectation with that is that you're bringing the programming schedule from another system to bring those formats to it so that you can quickly execute the scheduling and playout. Whereas on the reverse side, a system like Frequency Studio, which is the way I had designed it, was you can manage your content, you create the actual programs, it has a calendar in it, and then it sends those instructions for scheduling and playout all inside of one system. And for anyone who's used Amagi's system, incredibly powerful, but you have people working around the clock to assemble all the individual events into the playout schema. And yes, you can copy and paste them, but the actual management of that, the broadcast program planning, is not there. So again, to revisit things, really should differentiate between ad-supported VOD and ad-supported linear. Again, business model plus delivery method. The difference between live and linear, my assumption is live means not previously recorded and running continuously. Linear can mean combination of live, not previously recorded, and previously recorded assets. And the final thing is really differentiate between scheduling and long-term broadcast programming, which is the ordering of the events and saving those things so you can loop them again. The other big thing for anyone that knows traditional broadcast planning is stripping, which means if you have an episodic program, you can literally say, run it from 4 to 8 every day sequentially for the next 40 weeks. You can't do that in an exclusively scheduling system because it has no memory, it has no deeper connection to understand the relationship between series, season, and episode. A lot of technical information there. Freddie, I hope that was useful.
Well,
100%.
thanks a lot, George. We are just about at time, so I want to thank you so much for joining us. Great presentation, and thank you to all our attendees as well. Thanks for those who asked some really great questions. And so with that, I'm going to close things up and thank everybody for jumping on with us today to our Wednesday webinar series. We did record this, and so it's going to be available on the OTT-X TV YouTube channel, and the PowerPoint is going to be available for OTT-X members on our site at OTT-X.org. Just look under Industry Research Presentations. Hope everybody will join us for our next session. It's on June 17th. We're going to have the pleasure of hearing from Carol Hammond. She's Chief Revenue and Strategy Officer at WIT Media, and her presentation is entitled The Streaming Wars, Engaging the Connected Consumer. As always, you can register for the webinar on our site under Events and Programs. I'm also going to put the link to registration right into the chat window right now. So if y'all want to just jump on there, you'll be able to register right from here. So with that, we'll close it up. Thanks again, George. Terrific presentation. Really enjoyed it. And do say hi to your dog. Let him or her back into the room. We'd love to. Oh, excellent. We'd love to meet your dog. Hello. All right, well, with that, thanks so much. Really enjoyed it.
Bye-bye.